Hi and welcome to Dark Rain True Crime. I post solved true crime cases on a weekly basis, so if you're into that sort of thing, hit that subscribe button. Today's case covers two countries, England and the United States, and tells the story of a beautiful young lady with her whole life ahead of her, called Catherine Ayling. Catherine Ayling was born in March 1977. She and her siblings, brother Chris, and three elder sisters Sylvia, Angela and Teresa, were brought up by their father Bill, after the breakdown of her parents' marriage. Catherine was an attractive, outgoing student, who was studying humanities at a college in Cheshire. Her bubbly personality made her a popular student, and at the age of 22, she was living life to the full. In April 1989, Catherine had great news for her family. Together, with 8 of her college friends, she had been offered a 16-week spell as an exchange student in the United States. Her family were worried at the thought of her going so far away at such a young age, but they were comforted by the thought of there being a group of them, and she was not going alone. Several months later, in August that same year, Catherine packed her suitcase, and together with her friends, they headed to Gatwick Airport and flew out to Massachusetts and Bridgewater State College, near the city of Boston. Catherine soon settled into the American way of life, staying close with her friends that she traveled with, and also making new friends in America. She was a pretty 22-year-old girl, with an easygoing nature, and she had many male admirers. Although Catherine wasn't looking for a relationship, she did go on a few dates to bars and parties, but always stated she wasn't looking for anything serious. It was while she attended a class at college that she caught the eye of 25-year-old Curtis Howard. Curtis was a 6'4", stockily built young man who grew up in the deprived slum area of Boston. Despite his poor upbringing, Curtis showed a lot of promise. He stuck in at school, gained good exam results and was accepted at the same Bridgewater State College that Catherine attended. He was known as the Gentle Giant, and as soon as he seen Catherine on campus, he began asking her out on a date. At first Catherine politely refused, saying she didn't want a relationship, and was wanting to concentrate on her studies. But Curtis was persistent, and kept pestering her for a date. Catherine feared that her constant refusals could be interpreted as a racial snub, so eventually gave in and agreed to go on one date with him. When the date night arrived, Catherine was a little shocked at how much effort Curtis had put into it. He turned up in a chauffeur-driven stretch limousine, wearing a white tuxedo, and took her to one of Boston's most expensive waterfront restaurants. Although Catherine was impressed with all the effort Curtis had made, and all of the attention she was getting, it still made no difference to her feelings towards Curtis. The evening went well, and the limousine took the pair home. Curtis walked Catherine to her door and she politely thanked him, before going to bed alone. Early the next day, Curtis was straight on the phone, asking for another date. Catherine explained that she enjoyed the evening, but didn't want a relationship and politely refused the offer. Curtis kept ringing and ringing, pestering her for another date, but Catherine stood her ground and refused. This constant ringing went on for weeks, and Catherine started to get the feeling that Curtis was developing an obsession with her. She went on a college outing to Montreal in Canada, and was horrified to find out that Curtis was on the same trip. What made it worse is when she realized that she was assigned to be in the same room as him. Curtis pestered her to sleep in his bed with him, but Catherine asked the college staff for her to be allocated to a different room, which they did. The next morning, Curtis apologized for his behavior, and asked Catherine if they could remain friends, which Catherine agreed to, as she knew that in a few weeks, her student exchange was coming to an end and she would be flying back to England. But just days after the college trip, Catherine got some dreadful news. Her father, who she was very close to, had died from a heart attack. Distraught, she packed her belongings and jumped on the next plane home to be with her brother and sisters, not even having time to say goodbye to her new American friends, who had been so welcoming during her stay. Catherine arrived back in the UK, and went to stay with her sister Sylvia in the small village of Wick. The close family would support each other through this terrible time in their lives. She thought she had heard the last from Curtis, who was over 4,000 miles away, but she was wrong, and she started getting bombarded with phone calls from him. It was unclear how he managed to locate Sylvia's telephone number, but he was relentless on ringing, wanting to speak with Catherine day and night. Although the calls continued, Catherine managed to get into a normal way of life. She returned to Cheshire to continue her studies at the Crewe and All-Saga College, planning to become a teacher upon her graduation. Still, Curtis bombarded her with phone calls and letters, declaring his love for her, telling her she would be his one day, all the while she would politely tell him that she didn't was a serious relationship. A $200 leather jacket would arrive in the mail, more letters and phone calls would come, and Catherine was getting a little pissed off with it all. She firmly told him that she was happy to be friends, but at no point in her life would she ever be romantically involved with him. Catherine thought this had done the trick, and for a few weeks, all letters and phone calls stopped. She could relax and move on from it. But after a month, they started again. This time they weren't love letters or sweet talk, they were letters filled with hate and spiteful phone calls. Sylvia rang the phone company and got all of the calls blocked, but this was only the start of the family's nightmare. One evening in late June, Sylvia had just finished work and returned home to find her house had been broken into, and the words "Catherine is dead" was carved into the wooden door, and there was also a threatening note left at the scene saying, "Catherine Ayling, you will burn in hell." She knew it was Curtis Howard. Sylvia immediately rang police and informed them about the calls and letters Curtis was sending and his infatuation with her sister. A man fitting Curtis's description was seen by a neighbor in the area earlier that day. The same man was seen later in the evening, hanging around a pub that Catherine sometimes worked in. It seemed Curtis had made his way to England to find her, and Catherine was rightfully terrified. Catherine made alternative arrangements to stay at a friend's house until police tracked Curtis down. It didn't take long to find him. Sylvia's boyfriend Paddy was driving along the road near their house and spotted the unmistakable 6'4" man walking along the path. Paddy immediately informed police, who quickly apprehended the man. He was taken to Arundel Police Station, where he was found to be in possession of Sylvia's checkbook and check guarantee card. He was charged with burglary and remanded in custody until a court hearing 10 days later. When the court date arrived, he was found guilty of burglary and was given a 2-year suspended jail sentence. No punishment, just don't be a naughty boy again, it's an absolute joke. The following day he was taken to Gatwick Airport, and his passport was stamped with why he was expelled from the UK. What is the point of giving someone a suspended jail sentence if they are to be kicked out of the country and unable to return? He should have been jailed, and then boot him out of the country. This should have been the end of Catherine's nightmare, but they underestimated the determination of Curtis Howard. Once he'd returned back to the United States, he began planning a return to England. He knew he wouldn't be allowed back into the country with his own passport, so planned on getting a false one. The first time he tried, he used the identity of someone his own age, who had died without ever owning a passport. This, however, was thwarted by a passport office worker, who noticed discrepancies and informed the FBI. Agents visited Curtis, and he admitted the deception, but was only given a warning by the federal agents. Just another little slap on the wrist for Curtis. No wonder there's so much crime in the world if people aren't getting punished for the crimes they commit. Obviously this didn't deter Curtis. He probably had a giggle about how lenient they were, and he devised another plan. Curtis then got a friend who looked very similar to him, to wear his glasses and apply for a passport. This time it worked, and now Curtis had a fake passport in the name of Dwayne Williams. Now there was nothing stopping him returning to the UK. In May 1991, Curtis arrived back in England, and nobody had any idea he was there. This time he vowed to find Catherine. The first thing he done was paid £500 to a detective agency, who gave him the address of where Catherine was living. Next on his list was to hire a car and head to the northwest of England to check out the campus where Catherine was staying. He arrived at the campus the next day, and immediately bumped into one of Catherine's friends, who was one of the exchange students in America, but unfortunately, the friend never relayed the information back to Catherine. Then Catherine herself caught a glimpse of Curtis hanging around the campus. She told friends and even had a tutor walk her around the campus looking for him, but he was nowhere to be seen, and friends convinced her she was imagining it, because Curtis wasn't allowed into the country. Catherine continued her hard work studying for her finals, and spent much of her time in the college library. Upon leaving there on the 29th of May 1991, she made her way to her car with her arms full of books. When she arrived at her car, she noticed it had a flat tire. Little did she know that Curtis had slashed it with a knife so she couldn't drive away, and he was sitting in the car beside hers with the windows blacked out, so she couldn't see him. He waited till she opened the car door before he ambushed her. 2 women nearby heard Catherine screaming, but assumed it was just some lovers fooling around. Witnesses would later tell police that the screams went on for nearly 10 minutes before it fell quiet. 10 minutes this poor girl was screaming and nobody came to help her. Catherine was murdered with a knife, and when she finally stopped breathing, Curtis simply picked her up and put her in the boot of his hired car. He then drove directly to Gatwick Airport, parking in the long stay car park, and caught the bus to the terminal. He thought he could fool the police by putting some strands of hair from another person on her body, and within a few hours, he was in the air, heading back to the United States. Had he committed the perfect crime? Later that morning, tutors became concerned when the normally punctual Catherine failed to show up for class, and police were called when her car was found in the car park with a flat tire. Police immediately became concerned when they opened the car and the seats were covered in blood. Police spoke with Catherine's family, and it was pretty apparent that they were looking for Curtis Howard in relation to Catherine's disappearance. Checks were made at the airport, which included passenger lists and immigration records, along with car hire companies, and after 2 days they managed to locate the hire car, which still had Catherine's body in the boot. The UK police asked the FBI to locate and arrest Curtis Howard, but he wasn't at his address or any of his local haunts, so an APB was put out to arrest him on site. The FBI got a break when student counselor Dr. Kirk Avery told them that he had received a call from Curtis, telling him, "I killed Kathy, she died in my arms." Dr. Avery had heard about the murder through the media, and agreed to meet with Curtis at a house in Boston. When Curtis turned up, the FBI were waiting for him. When officers searched his apartment, they found a ripped-up letter from Curtis to a friend, confessing to the murder. It read, "My friend, I have done something terribly wrong, something I never thought in my wildest dreams, in my angriest moments. My God, what have I become? I committed an unforgivable and unspeakable act. I took the life of a person who never hated me, a person who never at any time sought to hurt me in any way, a person whose life was twice as meaningful, if not more than mine. My friend, I killed Catherine. I know it sounds unbelievable for even now, 24 hours after it happened, I can't believe it. It wasn't until I held her in my arms, and she called out my name and said she was cold, that I realized it was Catherine I had killed." Curtis fought extradition to the UK, but after 3 years he was eventually extradited, and went before Hove Crown Court on the 5th of July 1994. Curtis pleaded not guilty to murder, but guilty to manslaughter, on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The judge, Mr. Justice Hidden, deferred sentencing on Howard until doctors were able to do a further examination on his mental state. Sentencing took place at the Old Bailey in London on the 26th of October 1994. Doctors who examined Curtis said he suffered from paranoid psychosis and severe psychotic illness, leading to delusions of being persecuted. The judge said, "You are a cunning, devious, violent and dangerous man. You clearly became obsessed with Catherine. Even after her death I find it necessary to protect the public and her family from serious harm from you. I believe you are a potential danger for a long and uncertain period of time." He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 7 years. After sentencing, a full picture of his background was disclosed, and it showed it wasn't the first time that he'd become obsessed with a woman. At church, he met a girl called Linda B., a pretty girl from the Bermuda Islands. Like Catherine, she didn't want a relationship with Curtis, she just wanted to be friends with him. After she made that clear to him, he broke into her dormitory, followed her around, and bombarded her with phone calls and letters. Then one night when she was out with a group of friends, he jumped out on her from the darkness, dressed all in black, and slashed her across the face with a razor. The incident was reported to police, but Linda fled the area and managed to prevent Curtis from finding out where she had gone, and she later dropped the charges as she didn't want to come back to face him in a courtroom. Detectives discovered another incident when another girl turned him down. This time he stabbed himself in the stomach and was rushed to hospital. He had been arrested for armed robbery, possession of ammunition, and car theft, but was acquitted in 1987. And twice he was arrested for trespassing in a female dormitory. To add insult to the death of Catherine, Curtis persuaded a parole board that he was no longer a threat to society, after just 7 years in jail. 7 fucking years for taking the life of that poor young girl. I feel like that's an insult to her family. And also, my opinion is that private detectives should not give out addresses of young girls to anyone that wants to find them. It should be illegal. That detective agency also has blood on its hands. It seems all through his life, Curtis was given a slap on the wrist for everything he's done, and now he's back in the United States. The American authorities have no duty to supervise prisoners released on license from British jails, so he wouldn't even have a parole officer to keep him in check. Lord help the next girl he gets obsessed with. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Please give it a like if you enjoyed the video, and you're welcome to subscribe if you'd like to see more true crime videos. See you in the next one.